kind of analytical and the observational skills that archaeology kind of, sort of generates, really. The ability to take lots of different sources and, tell a story, basically.
And actually, I found York's degree content covered such a wide period base and kind of wide area that actually it just gave me a really good background knowledge that meant moving around the country wasn't quite so daunting as it might have been.
There was one project that I refer to a lot because I now train a lot of people where I work, and it was when I was in third year, we had to collaboratively write like a paper together, which if you go down the pure academia route, that's going to help you learn how to write papers together. But from the other side, I've had that one experience of researching and writing like a fake paper, which means that I now know I'm very good at telling now when a paper's been written by different people and they haven't all read it. And that's really helpful for spotting ethical concerns. And that's a very, very specific skill that I didn't realize I would use so much. I can tell when an author didn't actually work on the paper. And author integrity is a huge part of my job.
A lot. And I remember one of the particular ones, such as the seminar, I think in our third year, and the lecture. Those things come up again and again in terms of what I'm learning is actually helping me now. What I learned, is really helping me now. And there's other elements which, have evolved since then. So communications, people skills, a little bit of networking.
Because for me, the reason that I did archaeology and ended up loving archaeology was because it had a bit of everything. It's like sort of the ultimate, for me, overarching science, humanities, everything is involved. And that's what I loved about my course, was how you'd, in one essay or one assignment on one sort of part of the course, you'll be including psychology and biology, and it's look, I need this bit to understand this bit of physics, or I need to understand this bit of medicine to understand the archaeological evidence. And I think for primary in particular, not obviously not on that scale, but it does mean you have a nice understanding of how knowledge isn't siloed, and how a lot of what primary schools are trying to do at the minute to try and cram in as much as they can is cross-curricular. And so I think having had that archaeology background of sort of cherry picking what you need and understanding of how knowledge interlinks, that means when you come to, say, combine a science and a history session, you can see those links a bit more.
What I think about archaeology as a whole is you're actually in this really, really unique and valuable position, because you have this perfect BA, BSc blend and combination of subject matter, right? You've got when you speak with example, like someone studied history, so you have that aspect of, historical, qualitative based research, you've got that. And then you layer on top of that, like we've touched on already, if you've done any work on Excel or in databases, or that kind of more quantitative orientated research, you've got that kind of like Venn diagram. You're bang right there in the middle, which is perfectly positioned when you try and pitch that to organizations. And you really have to make sure that you emphasize that, you are in a unique position in what you've studied to be able to do that. And you have an interest in humans because you're doing archaeology, and all the research that you've done and everything always has to be reapplied back and contextualized back to the context, whether it's a historical context, a geographical context. You're constantly having to contextualize whatever you find with with that in mind. So that's how I would, and I have done in job interviews and stuff, I've pitched it as, it's a perfect BA BSc blend. You're getting the best of both worlds, and that's how I'd kind of present it if I was kind of going for a job application. And that's how I see the value.
But then more broadly, the transferable skills that I've learned during my degree. So I'd say a big one that I learned, that I learned how not to do, I'd probably say, if I'm honest, is time management. Every job, whether it's a project like I'm currently working on or just day-to-day activities, has a time management element, and especially your dissertation, for example. It seems like such a long way off that you've got to hand it in, but actually you need to make the most of the time, plan out your time properly, and that is really important. In, for example, at the National Trust, I'd be planning the deep clean of the house, and again, it's sort of making the most of the time you've got, planning out, you know, each week, each month, whatever. So that is something that I say is a really big skill I learned from my degree. Also quite a broad one, but critical thinking. Obviously every piece of work you fill in involves critical thinking. And if I relate that to my job now and what I've done in the past, you know, when I look at an object, it's critical thinking. Is there any damage that I need to be aware of? Do I need to avoid certain areas if I'm cleaning it, for example? If I'm packing it, does something need to be supported? It might not seem like the same thing, but it's the same sort of set skill.
Specific skills that have impacted on my career are, I am an evolutionary biologist. That's the overarching thing that describes my scientific interests. And that was hugely informed by archaeology. And so the fundamentals of evolution were really amazing. And we got a really, really good grounding in it. And whilst we were looking at species evolution, the same concepts apply to molecular evolution and evolution of language, evolution of mobile phones, technological evolution, just the whole idea of it, as can be applied to lots of different areas, was a really, really thoroughly well covered thing that I've taken away. The other things that have been incredibly useful for me in what I do are the ability to be very critical of what resources I'm using. So I think it's something that isn't necessarily heavily covered in other subjects, but critical thinking and critical analysis of journal articles, including the methods that are used, was an incredible skill that I learned whilst I was in York. And adding to that, the ability to literature review. So I can read large volumes of literature because the techniques to do that were given to me, and also finding relevant literature. But yeah, literature reviewing has been crazily important, actually. Really, really excellent. And the ability to be like, I'm starting to read this and it's not relevant to me, I can turf it out and I don't have to read that. Also brilliant.
The difference in the degree at York is that is the amount of seminars and lectures and things that you end up having to do, presentations and things. When I first signed up to the degree and it said that, you'll have to give a lecture at the end of your degree about your dissertation, it almost put me off clicking the button to apply. I was terrified of the thought of doing that. But and it's not just me, it was everyone. I could see from the first week that you turn up at uni and you have to give your first presentation, it's not long after you start. It's really terrifying. But after the 3 years of being able to do that, by the end of it, everyone's so confident in seminars that you could talk for 2 hours about your dissertation, not 15 minutes. And so I think that was the best thing about going to York, was that you build confidence through practice of presentations and talking to people.
So obviously with my job, the knowledge that I obtained during my degrees at York, I pretty much use every day in my day-to-day job. And as I said, the project that I work on at the moment, we obtain lots of samples from lots of time periods and lots of different geographical locations. So having an understanding of the kind of archaeological context of the samples and having that kind of level of background knowledge, I think is really crucial. And because it then can allow us to link together any genetic information that we might get from samples with archaeology and kind of come to a better understanding of I guess in this case, domestication or perhaps population movements in the past. And yeah, the broad kind of level knowledge that I also got of archaeological science during both my undergraduate and my master's has been obviously incredibly useful in my job, and has also been really useful when I'm thinking about my research, thinking about different research questions, or when you're working on with colleagues on different projects, they're using other different techniques to you. Having kind of an awareness and understanding of what is, I think, really useful and can help you kind of tie things together a lot more.
Transferable skills is a massive one within field archaeology. You've got to be able to look at things in the ground, you've got to look at the geology and work out paperwork and use the IT systems and all those kind of things. So there's a lot of a background that you need to know on the technical aspect as well. But most importantly, it gives you the ability to be able to really disseminate writing reports, learning what you can in DBAs, things like that, which you might not necessarily think much about. But if you're given a working scheme of investigation for a site and you need to read through it, you've got to pick out those important parts. And more importantly, you've got to then translate those into what your research aims and objectives are for that particular site. So that's always a big part of it. On terms of the fieldwork side of things, the field term in first year has been excellent for me, having had that in my degree and then had such a long period of time out of it. You do get a good snapshot at everything as part of that process. So you do learn quite a bit about how you would do things, the way that you can maximize your sort of time on site, but more importantly, learn what muscles will ache at the end of the day and how you can sort of counteract them. 6 weeks in the field in Burdale for me was the most field work I'd done for nearly 10 years. So when I landed on my first archaeological site as a commercial archaeologist, it really sort of paid in that, yeah, I remember how to get rid of that ache and pain. And it's always worth sort of bearing those memories in mind. You never know when they come back to help you.